one more announcement. I'm going to tell you what happened when I went into the war. I was at the bus station in Ortonville, February 5th, 1944. My mother had me in her arms and she was crying. And she whispered in my ear, if you don't smoke until you're 21, I'll give you $100. I said, Mom, don't worry. And if you don't drink until you're 21, I'll give you another month. And then she got close to me. Dad was in the background and she said, there are bad girls who follow soldiers and prey on them. I said, Mom, don't worry about it. Well, I came home on my first furlough, and she hugged me and she said, you smoke. Well, I chewed 2 or 3 packages of gum before I got home. I could feel the package in your pockets. The best laid plans. And then I said, Mom, I lost the other 100 in the beer garden. Now let's call on Glenn Shull to tell us about our speaker today. Give him a hand.
Before we get started with our speaker, I'd like to make an announcement. Somebody we should be very proud of. Larry Sagstetter was just elected to the local Rawlings AFA chapter as their president. That's quite an accomplishment for anybody to become president of the Rawlings chapter. Congratulations, Larry. I get my notes out here.
Bad sign, but
Hey, it's been fun. Our speaker today is a fellow named Rollie Daniels, 90 years young. He was in the Second World War, and he was with the 82nd Airborne. And he dropped into Eglise in France in the Battle of Normandy. I'm going to tell you his story. Back up just a little bit. Rollie is 91. He still plays tennis 3 times a week. Still plays softball for the Morning Jocks. Very active guy. I think he still chases girls, but he's got a beautiful woman here with him. Rollie, you want to come forward, please? About right there, Rollie, be fine.
Well, I'll start from the time that I was drafted in 1943, January. Now, can you hear me? All right, I'll try to bring her right up. How's that?
very good.
All right. In 1943, January, I was drafted in the Army. And I went from Fort Hays, Columbus, Ohio to South Carolina, Camp Cross, South Carolina, near Spartansburg. Spent 13 long weeks in basic training. The last week of the basic training, I was introduced, or we were introduced to a speaker from Fort Benning, Georgia, who was from the Paratroopers and was there to recruit paratroops for the Army. And he did such a good job of telling us the food was better, and if you get to ride in a plane once in a while, and you don't walk all the time like the Army does. And he convinced me, which I was about 20 years old then, that it was better than going into the Army. So I joined, and immediately after we graduated from basic training, we were put on a train and went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and spent, you're supposed to be 4 weeks there to get your wings. Well, I ended up being there for 6 weeks because I hurt my knee jumping off a mock-up tower, and I still got better and got out of the hospital, and I continued with training. And I got my wings, and then I was sent to Alliance, Nebraska with the 507 Parachute Infantry. And I stayed we stayed in Alliance, Nebraska until October, the latter part of October. We were alerted and we were getting ready to go overseas. We took a train clear across the United States to New Jersey. And when we got on the River, which was a big boat which had 10,000 troops. When we went down to the dock, the St. Mary's was on one side of the dock and the River was on the other. Well, the St. Mary's boat made it in 4 days. When we got to England, we had been on the boat 14 days. And then we got off at night. We got on the dock and he said, oh no, you're going to get on another boat. And we got on another boat, which was an army boat, and went to Ireland, where we spent in Fort Rush, Ireland. We were there until March of 43. Then we came back by boat to England, Liverpool, and took a train to Nottingham, England. We were near a little town called Tollerton, which had a castle, and the castle was called Tollerton Hall. And that's where we bivouacked for 6 months. We were there when we jumped in Normandy, June the 6th. There were 2,004 of us jumped in Normandy. There was 700 of us got on the boat after 35 days. I remember General Eisenhower telling us when we were in the airport that we would be no more than 6 days and no less than 3. But we were to hold our positions for 6 days so that the Army and the boats can get the tanks in and get up to us and not let the German tanks get over any of the bridges. Well, the long story is that we spent 35 days. There were, as I said, 2,004 people jumped. 700 survived. They got on the boat, took back to England after 35 days. I was a private, and I was an assistant gunner when I first went in. I had a M1 rifle. The gunner had a little carbine, and he carried the carbine and helped carry the machine gun. He was injured the second day in his head somewhere, and I became the gunner. So I was a machine gunner for 35 days, which I survived. I didn't get injured, I don't know why. We lost a lot of people, and I was one of the few that got on the boat back to England after 35 days. I could go through a portion of what we went through, but mainly I can just say that it vaguely, a lot of places I don't remember after 70 years. But mainly it was not a nice thing. War anywhere is bad. I lost a lot of assistant gunners. And when I would look around and say, who's going to be next? Nobody wanted to be next. One fellow towards the end of my time, there was a soldier named Johnny Oxford. And Johnny says, I'll be your assistant gunner. And from then on, I didn't lose a man. Johnny, just to make a little story, Johnny said to me, Danny, why don't we join the radar? I said, well, why would I want to join the radar when we get back to England? He said, because they want they make a jump behind the lines. When they come back, they're leisure time. They do whatever they want to do. Well, to make a story about Johnny, Johnny went with the radar. I didn't. And on a maneuver, about the second month he was in, a phosphorus grenade come in and landed in his foxhole and blinded him for life. I went to a convention 3 years ago, and I asked, did anybody know Johnny Oxford? And they said, yes, he comes to every reunion. He died a month ago. So I was very sorry that I didn't get to see him before that. As far as my experiences as a soldier, it's kind of hard to talk about, with the exception that we were in foxholes. We were mostly hiding behind trenches, which were what we call hedgerows, where the farmers had their crops and everything between the hedgerows and grew their crops. And we fought behind these hedgerows. The hedgerows varied in height from 2 feet to 4 feet. And if you wanted to fight the soldiers that you were fighting, the Nazis, you went around and it went around each hedgerow. You didn't go across because they had them all cross-fired or you would get killed. And this went on for, as you can say, 35 days. And we did go into a few towns and held these towns for a while, and then the Germans took them back over, we took them back over, and this went on for as long as I was there. The 8th Division finally got up to us and relieved us. And we were taken by truck back to the beach and got put on an LST, and at night we went back to England and got in Southampton. My battalion commander, Colonel Osberg, he got injured about the 4th day in, got shot in the lungs. And when we come back to Southampton, there he was. They got him out, and he was there on crutches. They wouldn't let him jump anymore, so we lost him. And everybody liked Colonel Osberg because he was an unusual person. He was a little short man, a West Point graduate, and he would come in the field in Alliance, Nebraska, and he'd say to his captain, Captain McCoy, get lost. I want to talk to my boys. And he'd say, well, what gripes do you have? And that's the kind of man he was. And one of the reasons that he got shot, I believe, was that he was up in the front lines too close. He should have been back directing us. And he wanted to fight the Germans alone. The thing that happened was that when he got injured, he couldn't stay with the paratroops any longer because he couldn't jump. So he joined the gliders, and he ran a whole regiment by himself. And in Belgium, he was shot and killed, and he was buried in Belgium. And later on, his wife had him brought back over and dug up the grave and had him brought back over to the United States. Colonel Mellett was our regimental commander. He was captured after 18 days with his whole group. I don't know what happened or how it happened, but he got put in the POW camp. And eventually, as I read later, he did escape from the POW camp and got to Italy and other countries, and eventually got back to the States. He stayed in the Army. He was he had a job in Vietnam and in Korea, and he was some type of officer in Germany when he got leukemia at the age of 50 and passed away. I learned a lot of this from the book called Down to Earth. It was written by Walter Morgan, and I found out more about the 507 than I ever knew. It has pictures all through it. It's a wonderful book. After we got back to England, to continue on with my story, we were on a maneuver, and I fell or something, and I twisted my knee so bad that they wouldn't let me jump, so they said, you have to leave the paratroops. And so I was taken out of the paratroops, didn't have any time. The next day I had to pack and get out, and they finally sent me to France, which I got eventually with the 29th Infantry Regiment, who was an outfit that was going in after like Bastogne. We went into Bastogne, the smoke was still coming out of the tanks, but we had taken it. We weren't fighting as a 29th Infantry Regiment. We had charge of the cleanup, and we saw a lot of bad things. And I stayed with the 29th Infantry Regiment until I was with them for almost 8 months, until October of 1945, and when I was sent home. And again, I thought, well, maybe I would get to fly home. I heard these boys flying home with all these points, you know. And to my surprise, we were taken to the beach and put on another boat, a little Liberty boat with no blast in the hold at all, 600 troops. And we had the worst storm that they've had in 40 years. It did everything but turn over. 14 days of this, and we finally come to New Jersey, and where we were put ashore and sent to our different places where we got discharged. So that's about it. I was just about 22 years old in 45. As far as going through what a lot of the soldiers went through from Vietnam and through the Afghanistan, I didn't seem to have that. When I got home, I had to take care of my brother, my little brother, which was about 12, 13 years old, and my mother. So I went to work and went to the West Coast and was in San Francisco area and worked in the shipyards for about 4 years. And then I decided I better get back to school. So I had an opportunity to go back and learn how to build orthotics and prosthetics, artificial limbs and braces. My father had lost his leg when he was 20 years old in Texas, had it shot off accidentally with a shotgun. And he eventually ended up at NYU also, and he set up the first program to teach how to make an artificial limb. And I stayed in it for 40 years, and then I retired in 1988. And that's about it. I've been very fortunate with my health and hope to continue for a few years more. So, and thank you for having me here.
Any questions?
Any questions for Rollie? Rollie, did you get a chance to go through that St. Mirror? Yes, the movie, The Longest Day, was about Paratrooper jumping into St. Mirror Eglise. Did you get there?
One thing I'll bring up, I forgot, when we come across the Guernsey Islands, they said you'll know when you go across the Guernsey Islands, which was held by the Germans. And that's right outside where Normandy is, it's an island. And so when we flew out of England, we flew across the Guernsey Islands. And as we hit the Guernsey Islands, they said you'll know when you get there because you can read a magazine. So sure enough, the attack was so bad that it was just lit up like a bonfire. And when we went over the Guernsey Islands, we hit our wing. And so our pilot took the plane down to about 250 feet from the ground. And Normandy is not too wide, so if you delayed too long, some of the planes did actually go to the other side and landed in the ocean and died. Our man, our jump lieutenant said when we were standing up waiting to jump out the door, he said, you have to bring this plane up. It's too close to the ground. And he said, as we understand, you either jump or go back to England. I'm not going back up in the AFHS. Next thing I knew, was that I shuffled and went out the door, and bam, I hit the ground. And all of the boys in my plane at least got down to the ground, didn't get killed then. So, and we missed our drop zone by about 2 or 3 miles from St. Mary Eglise. But eventually we got back together and became an outfit.
2 weeks after D-Day, my brother, 83rd Division, went into Utah. Was in there another week, and his knee was blown off between the hedgerows. He was the machine gun squad. He was a tech sergeant, and I want to get your address. And he wrote his story. It's interesting, and you probably know about it. So before you get out of here, I know.
Any more questions for Roland?
I have a two-part question. One, did you ever take any German prisoners? And the second part of the question, did you visit the concentration camps towards the end of the war?
I'm sorry, the second question was what?
Did you visit any concentration camps after the war?
Any prisoners?
Did you take any prisoners?
I never took any prisoners. We had prisoners that were on the road that other soldiers did. We had prisoners give themselves up and come and they didn't want anything to do with us. The gliders would take them over, and when they saw the guys with the big pockets, they called us the Red Devils with the big pockets. But they were told that the Red Devils, the Paratroopers, do not take any prisoners. And so that when we stepped out, they would see our big pockets and they'd run or get on the ground because they thought we were going to kill them. But I actually didn't capture any myself.
Anybody else?
Question here.
The man that you knew that fought with you, that later on joined the glider unit, you remember his name?
Oh, sure. Colonel Miller. Colonel Osberg.
Osberg?
Osberg, O-S-B-E-R-G. The reason I bring this up is that when I went to a convention 3 years ago at Fort Benning, this lady come up to me and she says, you know, I'm trying to find out something about Colonel Osberg. And why is this? Because I'm his daughter. I was 3 years old when he was killed. And so the only thing I could tell her was my experiences in Alliance and in our camp. Which I did. I told her, just like I told you, he'd come out and talk to us just like another soldier, not like a colonel. And she also was in London when I went back to Nottingham last year for the memorial that they give for the 507 in Tullerton. And she was there. And she did a little talk. And, yeah, Colonel Osborne,
Anybody else? Let's have a big hand for Rollie.